Squire, and so we are happy to have our pupils here and our teacher, Rosanna Zero and Benedetta Toni, that we thank you for the preparation, which was quite hard.
a tutti, good morning, bonjour. Dear guests, esteemed colleagues and educators from across Europe, it is really my great pleasure to welcome you to the beautiful city of Parma for the first edition of the European School System Teacher Forum and to host you here at the beautiful Scuola per l'Europa di Parma. We are gathered here today and tomorrow to embark on a journey of exploration, collaboration, and inspiration. Our forum, supported by a myriad of respected institutions, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Italian Ministry of Education and Merit, the Office of the Secretary General of European School, the staff of this school, the municipality of Parma, and many individuals, is a testament to the collective commitment towards advancing education in the European area. I extend my gratitude to the speakers, panelists, and organizers who have worked really tirelessly to bring this forum to life. A special thanks to our guests for their support and contribution. This event is set to unfold with enriching keynote speeches, interactive workshops, thematic panels, discussion, and above all, sharing best practices among educators from Italian school and European school. Our focus areas, intercultural education, inclusion, education for sustainable development, artificial intelligence, and European values and democratic culture, are really more than just the themes. They are the pillars upon which we build our future educational frameworks in such a complex and changing world. As we move through the program, I encourage you all to engage fully, to share your insight, and to forge new connection. The diversity of perspective represented here is our greatest strength and the key to enriching our practices. We are privileged to have with us Edoardo Massa, an Italian illustrator, scribe, and cartoonist based in Bologna. Edoardo will be accompanying our forum with his captivating drawings, lending us his unique lens through which to view our discussion. His work promises to aid us in reflecting upon the ideas we will explore, all the while learning and smiling together. Edoardo, if you want to show you to this beautiful, is over there. Just recently, I finished reading Jacques Attali's wonderful volume, Histoire et avenir de l'éducation. Attali closes his book with some very interesting recommendations, some of which seem really highly appropriate for this edition of the Teacher Forum, for this first edition. Attali suggests we must always cultivate our motivation to learn, and this is why we all are here. Dare to continually question ourselves, never stop learning, finding joy in sharing what we have learned, and understand through practice that teaching is the best way to learn. A special thanks to Benedetta and Rosanna, the teacher who animate the choir, the beautiful choir of our school. And in closing, I wish us all a productive and enlightening forum. May the discussion we have and all the ideas we generate lead to insight and to a stronger and more inclusive European educational system. I hope that we can rediscover together during this day the centrality and the pleasure of teaching and sharing. Thank you. My friend in this adventure is Professor Alberto Melloni, who is the Chief Scientific Advisor for the European Commission, an important professor, and then I will explain you who Alberto Melloni is, and he will be with me this morning. He doesn't leave me alone, and I'm very happy about this. So, we start with the welcome remarks, and I'm honored to introduce you our Major of Parma, Michele Guerra. You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to welcome you in Parma for this important event of the Teachers Forum, and to do that in this beautiful School for Europe and in this auditorium which is dedicated to a strong, a real European man, the unforgettable President David Sassoli. A friend of our city and still an inspiration for a political approach to Europe in a complex moment, in a complex time like that we have to live in. So you are in a European city in the very meaning of the term, because if you will have the chance to visit Parma during these days, if you'll have the chance to go through our street, our squares, to visit our artistic treasures, you will find the history of a city as a crossroad for cultures and exchanges, a city based on relationships, and we think that this is very important nowadays because we need to rediscover this idea of exchange, of relationship, of learning, never stop learning, like Jacques Attali wrote. And this is important because, you know, Parma is hosting important European institutions like EFSA, of course, like the European School, like the Foundation Collegio Europeo, like our university or our municipality, which is strictly connected to many other cities in Europe and to many other cities also extra and out of Europe. We have to preserve, we have to cultivate, we have to promote this European value, and we can do that starting exactly from the education. Education is the motor of every effort to build a new and more aware idea of Europe. We need to include young people, and of course a place like that is perfect to do that. We need to create a new spirit in a city like that, in a country like that, and also in a community so large as the European community is. I would like to mention just two projects, two European projects in which Parma is included that are very important to us, and I think that somehow these topics will be included also in these days of work you are going to do here in Parma. The first project is the mission for the smart and climate-neutral cities by 2030, and Parma is one of the 9 Italian cities included in this project, and we are working very hard to pursue this challenging goal. And the second project, maybe more fit with these days, is the European Youth Capital. Parma is in the top 5 for the title of European Youth Capital in 2027. All these projects are part of a context, that we have to move together on these goals, toward these goals, and we need these exchanges, these meetings, these moments of confrontation to improve our approach to the European complexity and to the European way of life. So I really thank all the people who made possible this Teachers Forum here in Parma. The city is not only pleased but also honored and happy to host you, and I'm sure you will find inspirational moment here in the School for Europe and also outside here in our beautiful town. So thank you very much.
Major, your portrait is wonderful. Now, I'm happy to have with us Paola Salomoni, Council Member of Emilia-Romagna region. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody, and thank you, Director. we are not just in a European city, we are in a European region. I think this is a very European region, not just a European region. I want to thank, first of all the organizations that work for this forum, to have all of you here today. First the municipality, obviously, Confindustria, the two ministers and two ministries involved, and but I think that I have to do a special thank to the director Roberta Fantinato, because is her tireless dedication and the enthusiastic commitment to ensure the success of the school and the success of the forum that give to all of us the opportunity to be here today. And I think that this is a significant, important milestone for the Italian presidency of the European school system. So we are very honored to have this opportunity today in our region. But I think also that if we take a look to the program you are going to explore in these days, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of principles that are at the basis of our educational policies. I want, for example, to cite this morning program and consider the four topics we are going to explore today that are intercultural education, inclusion, sustainable development, European values. I can't imagine something more near to our pillars in the educational policies. So I think that the whole forum will be for you, but will be also for the educators in our region, in our area, a great opportunity to share ideas and best practices and way of work and improve the educational system, not only just inside the European school, but also outside, giving to the territory a great add value. I also want to cite some other elements of the program that I think it's really important from the region point of view, and is artificial intelligence. The role of artificial intelligence is in every kind of context both an important potential and a great concern. But in education, the concern and the potential are greater than in the main sectors. I mean, artificial intelligence in industry is really interesting, but not in the same way and with the same risks and with the same great values that it can have inside education. So I think that will be a great opportunity to discuss, and this is a theme that is really in my heart personally, but also as a regional minister. So I want to conclude. I'm here not clearly just to thank from my point of view and welcome from my point of view, but also to consider this thank and welcome from the whole regional government and from the President Stefano Bonaccini, and enjoy the forum. I'm sure that it will be a great opportunity to enrich the territory and to reach all the present people, obviously. Enjoy the city. The city is really great. I want to go with the mayor. It's a wonderful place. It's an ancient city, but it's also vibrant and smart, so gives a lot of opportunity. And I want to underline, you got a very nice day. That's not so obviously in Italy and in Emilia-Romagna. So enjoy the city, enjoy the day, and have a great forum today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you to Paola Salomone. Now we welcome Giovanni Desco, Senior Officer of Regional Education Office of Emilia-Romagna. Good morning, Giovanni Desco. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for your invitation and welcome everybody. Dear authorities, dear teachers, thank you for the invitation to such an important event. It is my honor to bring you the greetings from the local office of Emilia-Romagna of Ministry of Education and Merit. It is a great pleasure that the first edition of the Forum of Teachers Working in European Schools takes place in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna. I do wish you that other editions could follow in the next years, so to let this event become a permanent one. Since ages, the encounter with other cultures is one of education's main objectives. Nonetheless, nowadays, this very objective is more necessary than ever, given the globalization we are living in and the ongoing conflicts, unfortunately. While education systems and degrees recognition are a sole competence of individual member states, it is within an European framework that they work. I'm referring, among others, to EQF, European Qualification Framework System, and I'm referring on the European Council recommendation on key competencies for lifelong learning. Nonetheless, there is I think there is a risk that both European schools and national schools live isolated within their very own education system, within their communities, with the consequences to lose some opportunities. The opportunity to internationalize their educational offer with regards to national schools, our schools, Italian schools, and to lose the opportunity to integrate themselves with the local schools with regard to European schools. But I think there's an alternative scenario. European schools can be the place for both personal and professional development for both students and teachers at the European and national level. It is indeed only thanks to meetings like this that we really can get to know each other. That is why I wish all participants could make the most of these 2 days meeting in Parma and work as best as possible in their schools. Thanks again, wishing you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Giovanni Desco. Now, I'm pleased to introduce Luisa Veniere, Senior Legal Officer from EFSA and a member also of our board.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. As Roberta said, I'm Luisa Veniere, and I'm hereby bring you the greetings of the Executive Director of EFSA, Mr. Bernard Urla, that could not attend this meeting today. Asked me to participate on his behalf. It is with a great pleasure that I attend this forum, also in my capacity of member representing EFSA in the Scuola per l'Europa Management Board. Let me spend very few words to welcome this very interesting initiative. I am one of the fewest, I think, that witnessed the born of this school. It was 2005 when I moved from Brussels to Parma, and I can tell you we were very few pioneers, I think less than 50 persons coming from Brussels to Parma. We moved here, and I can tell you that we were, even if in a limited number, always interested in the school. The school was the core, a crucial, essential element of priority of all of us as staff of EFSA. The importance to have a school that could guarantee to our children a European education, that could welcome staff coming from all over Europe, foreseeing a curricula that would have guaranteed to our children a teaching in a variety of languages with a European focus. Incredibly much has been done. If you look around, a very beautiful school, almost 800 students, 100 persons as staff. And all this has always and always been at the core of EFSA's interest. Because as parents, put at the center of our lives the well-being, among which primarily education of our children. For this, a big thanks shall go to all of us, the national and local authorities of Parma, the national authorities of Italy, of course, the youth system, including EFSA, that supports this project since the beginning, the school as a whole, and the teachers that make this opportunity being a success every day. Everything is perfectible. This is why we are all here in a continuous effort for improvement. Put together all our strengths to make the topics of today's debate affordable, successful, and happening in the daily routine of the school. The themes debated in this forum couldn't be more interesting. Plurilingualism, multiculturalism, European values in education, future represented by the artificial intelligence. In few words, hopes for a better future. In a nutshell, they imply education and sharing. A qualitative education as that taught in the European schools model opens the minds and prepares to lives with critical spirit. What's best for our children in the existing world? Sharing puts human beings on the right journey to inclusion and equality. It brings identity and diversity together towards common goals of intellectual growth and friendship. Here I believe that European schools embrace these two hopes. They are a treasure trove of quality education within a framework of sharing and inclusion between various identities and various cultures, the cultures of all of us, the European cultures. These hopes are the backbones of this event in the pursuance of the European spirit. As EFSA staff and as a mother, I thank you all that make this possible, providing our children with a vision that is the toolkit for their future growth. Thank you, and I really wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for this really inspiring speech. Now Cesare Azzali, President of Fondazione Collegio Europeo di Parma. He will have a short speech in Italian. I think that you can understand. I hope.
Allora, la Fantinato, a tutela del sottoscritto, ha ritenuto di farmi parlare in italiano. Maintenant, on pourrait parler en français parce que c'est la langue officielle de la communauté européenne. Mais alors, je retourne en italien parce que je la parle assez peu. Per la Fondazione Collegio Europeo di Parma è un onore poter portare il suo saluto oggi a voi. Prima di me hanno indicato in maniera molto chiara e articolata quali sono le possibili funzioni di un'esperienza quale è quella delle scuole per l'Europa. Io mi permetto, sottraendovi poco tempo, di sottolineare il fatto che essere voi qui tutti insieme oggi a ragionare di come è possibile offrire una formazione ai nostri ragazzi che sia adeguata alle sfide di questi tempi, è già di per sé un passo avanti, perché cominciamo a costruire una comunità di persone che si preoccupano di educare i giovani a una prospettiva che è quella di creare un futuro insieme nel contesto dell'Unione Europea, che crei una condivisione sia di principi che di valori, che sono la base fondamentale per poter realizzare non soltanto le condizioni per continuare a creare ricchezza non solo economica ma anche culturale, ma soprattutto creare quelle condizioni di rispetto e condivisione di valori comuni che sono alla base di una convivenza pacifica. Io credo che il lavoro di questi giorni darà un utile contributo a cercare di costruire una forma di formazione dei giovani in Europa che gli aiuti ad affrontare insieme le sfide del futuro. Grazie per la vostra presenza e ovviamente Parma è onorata di avervi qui. Grazie.
And now, opening addresses, Antonio Cenini, the President of the Board of Governors of the European School. You are welcome.
Thank you, Roberta. Good morning, everybody. Dear Mayor Guerra, authorities, local, regional, dear teachers, this is your moment. I would like to tell you the story, why we are here today and why we are having this teacher forum in Parma. And, but let me say that after listening to the choir of these children, I'm very happy because I'm sure that Europe has a bright future, because this is Europe. We are growing Europe, and we don't have to forget it. We are almost, I look at Andreas, lost every day into billions of papers, meetings, etc. But so this is what we are working for, and it's really worth. It's really worth. So why we are here? When Minister Tajani proposed me to become president of the European School during this school year, 2023-2024, we first, it was the moment when the European Parliament was discussing a very important report, a report on the future of European schools. So Italy took the presidency right in the moment when the European Parliament, the highest political body in Europe, was proposing a step forward for this system. The system is a success, but is 70 years old, and now Europe needs more European education, so we must do our best to empower this system. And with my fantastic team, Donato, Sabina, I don't mention them all, we met in Rome for the first time with the handover with the Irish presidency. We had to decide the priorities of the Italian presidency. So the point was, we have the European Parliament's report looking really forward in the mid-long term, maybe to the next 70 years, but we need to deliver something immediately to show that the system is alive and kicking, and then we are ready to address the main issues of the system to make it better, to improve it, to make it stronger. So Italy chose to have two priorities of a presidency. The first priority was, because we are still working on it, more general, promoting an enhanced reflection on the future of the European school system, which is a kind of follow-up of the European Parliament's report. And on this side, with the Secretary General, with the Board of Governors, we decided to prepare an action plan, very detailed, trying to see what can be done immediately, what can be done in mid-term, what can be done in the long term. And then maybe Andreas will say something on this action plan in his intervention afterwards. But the second priority, we decided to have a very short-term priority. So to focus on pedagogy, to focus on the exchange of best practices, and we decided to invest our time, energy on European teachers. And we decided to have this moment, the Teachers Forum, which is not in our plans only today and tomorrow, but in principle should become a permanent meeting. So every year, the European school system will have this meeting. So with the aim of creating this, let's say, momentum of meetings, also physically, also being together, also knowing each other, to work and to help creating a real European pedagogical area. And this is why we are here now. And what we want to achieve with this Teachers Forum. I forgot to say that We discussed the project, of course, with the Secretary General, with the Board of Governors, and the idea is that in coming presidencies, the next presidency will be of Cyprus, they will keep this meeting as a very important point in the agenda of their presidency. So we are starting today something that hopefully will last many, many years, and which would produce proposals, very concrete proposals, which will be used by the system to improve every year. What are the specific objectives of this meeting today? In general, we want to try to develop the concept of teacher's career. We want to give a coherent structure to current aspects of the teaching profession. We want to try to develop transparent opportunities for progression of the European careers, not necessarily linked to the salary, because the most of the time the debate is on the salaries, but it's much more than this. And the last but not the least, to provide a stimulating environment for staff to learn about innovative approaches, meet colleagues, reflect on these topics. So this is the idea we have. You are here to make it possible. You are here to create a real positive experience and make it possible to start this new approach. As a last point, personal point, I think that we will succeed, but we will succeed only if every actor of the system, starting from the directors to the teachers, to the parents, to the students, each part of the system will find the force to leave a little bit the comfort zone. So try to imagine something different from what we have now, without throwing away what we have now, but looking forward to something more. Tomorrow we will be here at the end of the 2 days to sum up, and also to share with the Board of Governors, which will attend the final meeting, and maybe already with the concrete proposal to implement. So for the moment, good luck, good work, and be part, please, of this successful process of making European schools even better and better. Thank you.
And now we have our Secretary, Andreas Beckmann, Secretary General of European School System. Thank you, Andreas. You are welcome to Parma, but you are used to come to Parma every year, so we are happy to have you here.
Grazie mille. So you can see I'm leaving my comfort zone Brussels quite frequently.
But it's Parma, your comfort zone, you know.
And it is really a pleasure and really also an honor to be here. Last year, when we had the inauguration of this wonderful place, remembering, as you have rightly said, a real European, David Sassoli, it was really an honor for me. It was very touching also to be with one of his daughters here, to listen to the students who had analyzed the speeches of Sassoli, of Mr. Sassoli. And so I'm really happy to be back here. And I'm very, very grateful to everybody who is here. But as Antonio has said, I'm in particular grateful to have the teachers with us, because it's a teachers forum. We are a lot of honorable members of management, etc. But the most important in these 2 days, and we should listen carefully, are the teachers, and listen to them and sharing with us the best practices from different schools. And I think this is the real importance of this forum. Yes, you may give an applause. And what is really important in this forum, and I think this was very much rightly highlighted by Mr. Desco, we have to get out of comfort zone, we have to get out of the bubble. We are already not only the 13 traditional schools, but all the accredited European schools. But from a political point of view, it is even more important to open up to the national systems. And I think this is the main idea behind the Teachers Forum, And I think it's also the main idea which was promoted or is promoted, and you will listen to her tomorrow, by the rapporteur of the European Parliament, who is in charge of the report. And she will share with you that she thinks European schools are really a treasure, but a treasure which is quite close, and we should open this treasure and make it transparent and share best practices among the European schools, but not only, also sharing it with the national schools. And so I'm really also looking forward to see best practices, this time from the Italian system. And like Antonio has said, this tradition will continue. We will go next year then under the Cyprus presidency to Nicosia, then to Latvia, Lithuania, and so on. And I think this is really important, and I'm grateful to the Italian presidency that you have directly taken the initiative. I recall when the Parliament for the first time was referring to this yearly event, I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical, because I could not really imagine what would it mean. Another meeting where we praise ourselves, or more than this. And talking to the Parliament, to the rapporteur, but also to other actors, talking to the Italian presidency, I understood what will be the added value. Having a vivid exchange among professionals, and this is really important, and I welcome as Secretary very much this. You're right, we are following up the Parliament's report and different recommendations. And besides this annual event, there are other recommendations which are very close to the program. The Parliament is highlighting the aspect of sustainable development. It's referring to new developments like artificial intelligence, but is also very much promoting the idea of continuous professional development. And this is exactly what we are doing in these 2 days. We have an exchange among professionals to learn from each other. And they are also promoting the idea of teacher careers, which is part of this forum as well. They are highlighting the importance in the traditional schools, for example, to establish a middle management structure. And we should go for it. This forum is the first step, like Antonio has said. Other steps have to follow, and we will discuss in the Board of Governors from Wednesday to Friday actions, concrete actions, to move forward, to address shortcomings currently in the teachers' careers in our system, in both probably in the traditional schools, but also in the accredited European schools. And we would like to promote careers within the system, but also beyond the system. You know that teachers quite often in the traditional schools, they are seconded for a certain while, but there must be also a perspective after leaving the European schools and coming back again. And I think this is something we should also look into deeper. Let me stop here by really thanking not only the Italian presidency, but obviously the school. I think, Roberta, you and your team have done a wonderful job preparing this event, the first Teachers Forum of the European schools. And obviously, as Secretary General, I would also like to thank my colleagues, in particular Manuel Bordoy, my deputy, who was in charge from our side to prepare everything, and Jerome Lucania. I don't know, Jerome, where you are? He did also an amazing job, so many thanks for that. And I wish all of us inspiring 2 days. Enjoy. Mille grazie.
So, we start with our keynote speaker, but before I want to introduce Professor Alberto Melloni. He's a Chief Scientific Advisor of European Commission, and is a secretary of an important foundation for religious sciences, a prestigious Italian research institution dedicated to the study of religious history. He's holder of the UNESCO Chair on Religious Pluralism and Peace at Sapienza University of Rome, and is Professor of History of Christianity of University of Modena Reggio Emilia. Professor Melloni is a leading figure in religious studies. He has contributed to understanding of religious pluralism and of peace. And we are really privileged to have Professor Melloni here. He will listen to all the keynote speeches, and then he will deliver the closing remarks. And he will be really inspiring as usual, and very, very nice and smart and ironic. So we are really looking forward to listening to Professor Meloni. And we start with the Professor Carmel Cunan. You are welcome. Full Professor of University Ca' Foscari, Venezia. Professor Cunan specializes in foreign and second language teaching and learning with a focus on emerging teaching methodologies and new target groups. You are welcome. You have, okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. I'd like to thank the director of the school for the very kind invitation to speak to you this morning. It really is an honor for me to speak because I'm actually in a context of excellence, and I'm aware that I'm in front of people who really have, let's say, excellency in their practices and so forth. I was asked to talk about the topic of plurilingualism. The slant that I've taken is pedagogical, considering that here in the public there are a lot of teachers and of course teacher directors and so forth. I have half an hour. I shall try to stay within the half an hour because of course I know that other people will be speaking after me. So I've decided to focus my intervention because of course plurilingualism and plurilingual education is vast. Hundreds of publications have been produced on it. So what I've decided to do is to isolate some facets of the issue and to bring them to light in order to understand what the job of language education is today and for the future. And in order to do this, I have chosen two concepts that help me to isolate the issues that I think are of importance today in order for us to face the tomorrow. And these two concepts are the concept of external plurilingualism and internal plurilingualism, and I'll try and explore these two issues. Now, external plurilingualism, these two concepts were coined by Vollmer, who works with a team of scholars in the Council of Europe, in the Language Policy Division, along with other scholars such as Beacot, Byram, and others, so many that I can't mention them all, of course. Now then, so there's one aspect, one pillar of promoting plurilingualism is that of adding languages to the individual's repertoire. So the individual will have a home language, he will acquire a competence in the national language, if that is different from the home language, and to that will be added other languages, foreign languages, and so forth. So external plurilingualism means adding extra languages. But there's a distinction to be made. And this distinction is made by the Council of Europe, and it appears especially in its document, the Common European Framework of Reference of 2001, and that's the distinction between multilingualism and plurilingualism. When we talk about people who know languages, we might say that they are bilingual, or if they know more than two languages, we might say that they are multilingual. Okay, but according to the Council of Europe, we're missing the point. In other words, the issue is not just merely adding languages to someone's repertoire. Let's see what they say. Plurilingualism, this what the Council of Europe says in its Common European Framework of Reference. plurilingualism differs from multilingualism. Multilingualism may be attained by simply diversifying languages on offer in a particular school or educational system, or by encouraging pupils to learn more than one foreign language. Now, a lot has been done in this area. As we can see, I arrived in Italy working in the area of educational linguistics in 1980, and I've seen the transformation of thought and understanding in the field of especially foreign language learning as time has gone by. And I've seen just how much has been done, particularly also in the Italian system, which I know far more of, obviously, as with me living here. So we now have the Council of Europe levels of attainment, A1, A2, C1, C2, and so forth. And everybody knows what these mean. But it's been a revelation for schools to understand how to go from one class to the other using the concept of gaining achievements in a level. We've seen the introduction of compulsory foreign language learning at different levels of schools and the universities. This is quite a novelty. Just think of the introduction of foreign language learning in the primary school system in Italy that was introduced in 1985 and applied completely by 1989. So Italy was at the avant-garde in introducing foreign language learning at such an early time in the school level. And of course, universities, we now have the compulsory learning of English, and we have courses delivered through English. We have a widening of offer of foreign languages. We don't only have the community languages, but we have languages such as Chinese and Arabic and Russian and Japanese and modern Greek and so forth. So the offer has been widened, and it's been multiplying through the language system. And there's also now attention to the autochthonous, the historical languages. Here I'm talking about Italy. Italy has been called a mini Europe because of all the autochthonous languages, historical minority languages that are present on its soil. And it is a fascinating aspect to explore, and of which so many Italians are even unaware of. According to the Council of Europe, this is plurilingualism, but there's more to it than just that, okay? So what schools need now to be doing is thinking about not just adding the languages, but it's the quality of the learning that is being attained through these languages that are added to the repertoires. So what do they say? The plurilingual approach emphasizes the fact that as an individual person's experience of language in its cultural context expands from the language of the home to that of society at large, which in Italian system might be dialect, which is commonly spoken in Italy, then to the Italian language, and then to the languages of other peoples, French, English, Spanish, German, he or she does not keep these languages and cultures in strictly separated mental compartments, but rather builds up a communicative competence to which all knowledge and experience of language contributes, and in which languages interrelate and interact. So here I can see already a problem. If I refer to the Italian system, this idea that if we don't want the pupils to learn the language in separated mental compartments, then we shouldn't be teaching them as separate linguistic compartments. But we have a situation in Italy where language teachers, I say here language teachers because what I'm going to be talking about later concerns other teachers, actually are trained separately. They never meet. They never have meetings where they are trained together. And they teach separately because they teach the way they have been trained, and they teach the way they have been taught. So everything is done separately. And so, of course, in this we are not helping the pupils to learn to see the interrelationships and the interactions between the different languages that make up their repertoires, and that we are contributing to expand their repertoires. So this obviously has implications for language education. It has implications for the way you as teachers and the way teachers, the schools, devise their language education policy. Maybe it's a whole language education policy that the school wishes to deliver. But it has implications. And way back in 2001, so we're talking about 23 years ago, yes, 23 years ago, the Council of Europe was well aware of the implications that this idea of plurilingualism, a highly individualized concept, you know, it concerns the individual and the quality of the learning that this individual builds up in his mind. The Council was well aware that this has implications for the way language education will be delivered. I have a quote here. From this perspective, the aim of language education is profoundly modified. It is no longer seen as simply to achieve mastery of one or two or even three languages taken in isolation. Now, of course, the concept of mastery is enclosed in the levels of attainment that each school is striving to get their pupils to reach, from A1, A2, and so forth. The responsibilities of educational authorities, there were so many, and that teachers, cannot simply be confined to the attainment of a given level of proficiency in a particular language at a particular moment in time, important though that undoubtedly is. So a lot of effort has been put in training teachers, in devising programs that are being helped also by the certification authorities to get their pupils to reach these levels. But as we can see, there's something else that according to the concept that the Council of Europe is proposing, there's something else lurking underneath that needs to be nurtured, it needs to be brought out. And I seem to see in these quotations, and from what I've been reading for this talk today, that there are notions that need to be understood and to be aware of, and to bring them out through the practices of delivering language education, which at this point I would like to call plurilingual language education. And so the notions of interrelatedness between the languages, how are we going to bring this out, bring it alive, and nurture it in the minds of the pupils. The transversality of the teaching, you know, what you teach in one language can be transversally important in the learning of another language. The flexibility that we want our pupils to have from moving from one language to the other, and the integration that needs to be done between the language of a single school in the language programs. They need to be integrated. So the issues concerning the interrelatedness and flexibility, integration, transversality, actually are inhibited by the fact that teaching is carried out in watertight compartments. I mean, they might be meeting up in the staff room, but what is being concretely done such that this watertightness is being burst? The concept of the bubble was used. This bubble needs to be burst, and the school needs to understand that something higher has to be reached through this acquisition of these several languages in these single-turn students' repertoires. So this watertight compartments inhibits the promotion of all these concepts, so that needs to be broken down. There is also, this obviously it depends on the single realities and also single countries, and I think it does not, with reference to the European school system where most children's mother tongue is taken into consideration, which is laudable, in the single normal mainstream schools this may not be the case, but there is limited recognition of non-taught languages present in schools and classes, and this is a rich linguistic and cultural resource for awareness raising in pupils, for aptitude development. You know, looking at languages that you're not learning to see what patterns there are can heighten one's aptitude towards noticing facts of language and understanding languages. In other words, we have, particularly today, we have a resource, a linguistic resource, a cultural resource, which is not being tapped. And a lot has to be gained from this. And also the concept of partial competencies. Now we're going for not just for 2 languages, but for 3, or even for 4. How can that be done in the limited time that one has in the curriculum? Well, there is the concept of not teaching a full competence, but teaching strategies for comprehension of other related languages. If you know Italian, and you've learned English, and we know that this big, very strong sub-compartment of the Romance language incorporated into English, then this Italian and the Latinate part of English can help you in learning French, or even to read Spanish. In other words, if you want to learn more languages, you can choose the partial competencies concept. Okay, more about that in a minute. So, essentially, I've listed some aspects which I think seem to distinguish what is plurilingual language education, apart from just adding more languages at different levels of attainment on the linguistic repertoire of the students. It builds bridges between languages on the curriculum, and this facilitates the language learning process. Because, of course, we're concerned with learning, essentially, and our teaching must be chosen on the basis of the kind of learning that we wish to promote in our pupils. So a plurilingual language education program would adopt similar methodologies, a common meta-language. You can imagine the confusion when a pupil is learning French, and a meta-language for the teaching and talking about French is quite distinct from the meta-language used to talk about English, for example. It's very confusing. So the idea that there could be a common meta-language helps the pupil to learn. The idea that you adopt a common methodology, perhaps also common objectives. We're going for writing. Okay, let's go for writing. How are we going to go about writing in English and in French or whatever other language? Let's come to some kind of agreement so that what we're doing is converging. It converges. The one helps the other, and the other helps the one. Plurilingual language education recognizes what has already been learnt in one language to build up competencies in another language. We want the pupils to do that, so we need to do it. We, talking about teachers, we need to do it also. It promotes comparative reflection between languages. Who does this at the moment? A comparative reflection between languages. And to what extent is Italian, here I'm talking about Italy, brought into the picture, which seems to be quite distinct from the issues that foreign language teachers face, concerned, and more about that in a minute, than Italian teachers of Italian, another language teacher, of course. It encourages the use of different languages in various activities. Now, of course, in the plurilingual competence, the companion guide, we see a new competence appear, and it's called the plurilingual competence. And, for example, the issue of mediation, the fact that, you know, you've got a text in English, you can translate it, or explain it, or paraphrase it, or reformulate it in French, the other language which is being taught. This is what life is outside of school. So why not incorporate it into the way that we're preparing our pupils in school? It promotes the use of intercomprehension strategies. These are things that the Council of Europe, after the Common European Framework of 2001, on the basis of their concept of plurilingualism, has been promoting, has been exploring, and lots of publications have been developed. Intercomprehension meaning that I, who speak Italian, but who am a native English speaker, through my knowledge also, passive knowledge of dialect, Venetian dialect, I am able, having learnt in a 3-hour course strategies of comprehension, I am able to read articles in Spanish, Catalan, Portuguese, Romanian. Now, you can see how this is important if we wish to expand the possibilities of the pupils to access content in other languages just by using what they already know. And I used what I already knew, so I've experienced it myself. Who's going to do this in a school? Could it be the language teacher, the language teachers together who decide how they're going to incorporate the teaching of these strategies and how they, it doesn't have to be a separate slot on the curriculum. In my experience, it was a 3-hour slot. Incorporate it, and you don't even have to call it, we're teaching you intercomprehension strategies. It can be, let's try this strategy today to understand French, which you're learning. Now we'll apply it to Catalan. Let's see if you can do it, and so forth. It makes space, another characteristic, it makes space for other non-taught languages, including those present in the classroom. And here, another aspect which has been developed by the Council of Europe is the Éveil aux langues, the Éveil aux langues activities. This has been especially developed in the primary school and the infant school. In Italy, this is hugely developed in the infant schools in the Valle d'Aosta, using French and patois and Italian. And we were part of the initial project Evlangue with Condelier, who developed the FREPA CARAP, which is available on the ECML site, the European Centre for Modern Languages. The CARAP, a framework of reference for pluralistic approaches, and there you will find material about the intercomprehension, integrated curriculum, and Éveil aux langues. In other words, we devised material where primary school children were brought to understand an initial understanding of a social linguistic nature by helping them to understand how children greet their teachers in the primary school. And they understood that in schools like Italy, for example, they use tu and maestra Cinzia, maestra Carolina. They use first names. Whereas in France and in England, no. They have to say Sir and Mr. Brown and Mrs. Smith. No first names. There was this awareness of a social linguistic nature, but not only that, but that it differs from country to country. Little things of awareness raising that can be developed through Éveil aux langues. They learnt new writing systems just by tapping into the children who were present in the school. But you'll learn more about that by going on to the CARAP and seeing what the Éveil aux langues activities are. Or what we also did, we got the children to learn a dip, una conta, in the different languages that were present. So they learned how to do a dip in Arabic and a dip in Chinese and a dip in the Venetian dialect and a dip in Italian. So these are opening up to other languages, but they're not learning these languages. They are experiencing them. Now then, the second part, and I have another 10 minutes. Well, my half hour will be ending in about, okay. The next one is internal plurilingualism. Internal plurilingualism is a different thought. And this is emerging now, and it is hugely important in my view. And it concerns the type of competence that you need to develop within a single language. So we're not talking about adding languages, we're talking about what you need to get your learners to learn within a single language. And of course, this is being developed in the Council of Europe. So I'll just read what I've written here. As seen, external plurilingualism concerns extending an individual's linguistic repertoire by adding languages to it. But internal plurilingualism concerns extending an individual's linguistic repertoire through the acquisition of different varieties and with registers within a single language. And Vollmer, because I'm using these two concepts by Vollmer, calls it a fundamental form of plurilingualism. And it is. But it is not understood to be so. This is being developed within the concept of language of schooling. In the case of the European school system, you have languages of schooling. You have more than one language through which schooling takes place. Okay? But in normal mainstream schooling, in Italy, it would be the Italian language. Okay. Now, what happens, and you hear idiosyncratically, we hear people complaining, even at university, the students can't write. You know, they can't write in Italian. Why is that? Why can that be? And and also if we consider the fact that the composition of the Italian school classes is more and more that of students who don't have Italian at home as the home language. So you have a situation where you have an inadequate language competence for learning the curricular subjects, and you have an inadequate outgoing competence related to these subjects. What is the outgoing competence that you want? Nobody really knows. That's the problem. Nobody really knows. So the issue is that language learning aims in these contexts generally is left implicit. And from what I've read, this is the case in Italy. And if you go and read the Indicazioni Nazionali for the so-called non-language subjects, you will not, in the high school, you will not see mentioned any objective for the language. The onus of preparing the students for language related to learning in the other so-called non-language subjects is the teacher of Italian. A different picture is painted in the middle school, which is far more. Now this is strange because the Indicazioni Nazionali were published in 2009, but already in 1970, by Tullio Di Mauro in Le 10 Tesi, complained about the fact that the teachers in the schools were teaching separately and had no regard for the issues connected with Italian. He was concerned with Italian, Tullio Di Mauro. And then, of course, we had in England the publication of the Bullock Report, again in the same year, the devastating revelations about the inadequacy in the competence of English led to the development of the concept of language across the curriculum, LAC, language across the curriculum. In other words, it can't be the job of the Italian teacher. It's the job of all the teachers to look after the national language, to get this competence up in the pupils. So, now what happened? Content and Language Integrated Learning, CLIL, appeared on the scene. It appeared on the scene towards the end of the 1990s, and it concerns foreign language medium instruction and a narrow range of school subjects, 1 and 2. In Italy, it's 1, with the exception of the Licei Linguistici, which is 2. Okay. It appeared on the scene, and it's interesting. It concerns foreign language medium instruction, but it's called CLIL, which means Content and Language Integrated Learning. Now, it seems to highlight the issue that we've talked about beforehand, because the question that one normally would ask oneself, well, why on earth do you want to use a foreign language as a medium of instruction? Why? What's the purpose? Well, it must be for the language. It can't be for chemistry. It must be for the language. So, CLIL, which promotes both types of plurilingualism, external plurilingualism and internal plurilingualism, promises an integrated type of learning. The content and the language. Now, when we began delivering CLIL courses here in Italy, because Italy has passed a law whereby CLIL is now compulsory in the final years of schooling, what does this consist of? What language objectives are there for chemistry, for physics, for history, for geography, whatever? And we asked ourselves these questions. And of course, the next question was, is this not what we should also be aiming for the main language of the schooling? Why are we only worried about this for the foreign language medium instruction? We need to be worried about this for the instruction through Italian. So in a certain sense, the CLIL issue has brought to the fore the whole issue of learning the national language, which is the language of instruction. We have the recommendations of the ministers of 2014, which is highly important. The Committee of Ministers, it says, it talks about the need to provide opportunities for all to acquire competencies in the languages of all students. Competencies of the language or languages in the European schools situation, which are necessary for success in various school subjects and also necessary for success in the living in society, living a full life in society. And the quote is, as every school subject 2 minutes. As every school subject, history, art, mathematics, including the language of schooling as a specific subject, so you have literature, uses its own specific forms of oral and written expression. Students must master these norms in order to appropriate the contents taught and successfully participate in school activities. Thus, the need to promote effective consideration of the linguistic dimensions in the various schools' subjects. This is, yeah, I would go further. It's not that if we, how do we intend linguistic dimension? Look at the language of the subject, but we also need to look at the language used to teach the subject and the activities that the pupils need to undertake to learn the subject. There are different kinds of languages, okay, but all in the language of schooling. So internal plurilingualism, according to Vollmer, can be described in terms of academic literacy, which is conceptual literacy. The learner is able to think clearly in that language, and therefore to elaborate, to think, to cognize in the language. And a discourse competence, the ability to express himself clearly in accordance with the academic register and conventions of the single subjects. In order, writing up a research report after having done an experiment in chemistry is different from writing a critical appreciation of a work of art that you have analyzed. There are different ways of writing, and these need to be appropriated, and therefore they need to be taught. Vollmer says that this doesn't happen on its own. It has to be promoted, sustained, and guided. So what we need to know is what language the learner must understand and what language the learner will produce, and therefore, if we know this, we know what the potential learning objectives might be. So what do they need to understand? Oral or written? Explanations, narrations, hypotheses, analyses, evaluations, descriptions. Do we know? And in what form will they be delivered in? As teacher input, as documentary films, as interviews, as textbooks, as articles, as authentic documents, as press, as a theatrical, whatever. Do we know? Do we make an effort to find out what they might be? Okay? And producing, what do they have to produce? Do they have to produce orally or written explanations, narrations, hypotheses, analyses, comparisons, evaluations, description, and it goes on? Do we have an awareness of what we're asking them to produce? And in what form would they have to be produced in? In interaction, in monologue, in interviews, in presentations? Interviews, do they have to go out and interview old people about what they did, historical methodology? Do they have to write summaries? Basically, in our research with CLIL teachers, and looking at their work that they produced, and I've got one last slide, they don't provide very much for production. We looked at the exercises or activities they proposed, and from the written point of view, the length was a problem. They would produce one word, like putting a word in filling out a map, one word. Okay, maximum 2 words, completing a sentence. Or a full text would be a definition, 1 sentence. Now, is that the kind of writing competence that we want them to leave school with? This is totally inadequate. If then they have to go to university and write what they have to write. Okay. And my last slide, therefore, is the 2 concepts of internal and external plurilingualism show up the complexities of language learning for active participation in today's society. And schools have to work on both of these. What is the poor parent at the moment is the one of internal plurilingualism. We need to break down barriers and find convergences. What you're doing in chemistry might be useful for physics and whatever. Find what connections that there are. Make the convergences and to find out what the cross-cutting effects are. And this is ongoing work. A lot of work has been produced now by the Language Policy Division of the Council of Europe. They've produced work for history, they've produced work for mathematics, and they have produced work for science, and they produce work for literature. And it is ongoing, and they recognize that it is still ongoing, but there's so much work on the Language Policy Division. You can find so many documents that have been produced which are very useful for curriculum designers, for materials designers, and for single teachers who want to know more about this. So I've given you here, this is, you can, if you receive this in electronic format, you can blow it up, and you can see all the connections, all the links that will help you to explore these issues further. I hope I've opened a little bit of eyes, a few eyes on the whole issue of plurilingualism and plurilingual language education.
Very interesting and inspiring speech of Professor Cunan. A lot of things to think about, especially for our national system, unfortunately. And now we have Professor Alessandra Romano. We give the floor to Professor Alessandra Romano. After Professor Romano, we have a break, a coffee break, which is becoming shorter and shorter. So please, because we are a bit late. Professor Alessandra Romano, she's a professor, associate professor at Università di Siena, and she will have a focus on application of inclusive education, so policies, experience that can foster inclusion in educational settings. And I think that here Italy is a bit more proud about the theme than about the multilanguage and plurilinguistic. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that I have the worst time of the day, I think, because it's exactly before the coffee break. But I promise you I will try. Oh, yes, before lunch, it might be worth. But I try to be, fast and brief. You know that I'm an Italian native speaker, and Italian use a lot of words to express a very simple concept. So please forgive me for if I will be longer, okay? But I will try to do my best. And I want to just thank the head of the European School of Parma, Professor Roberta Fantinato. I want to thank Professor Saccardo and Professor Rubinacci for inviting me to join this amazing first edition of the Teachers Forum. It's a real pleasure for me to stay here with you. The focus of my intervention, unfortunately, won't be so interesting as the plurilingualism intervention that was just presented a little bit before, but we'll offer you some suggestions and we hope some prompt to reflect upon your assumptions and your perspectives on inclusive teaching in your classroom. So just a very short introduction. I'm an associate professor in inclusive education at the University of Siena, and I was the coordinator of the specialization program for support teachers from 2018 to 2023 at my university. And I want to start trying to engage you with a self-reflective activity. So Professor Beckman just introduced that one of the purpose of this Teachers Forum is to start a self-reflective process. So just keep in your mind those two questions. You don't need to answer aloud. You just need to start reflecting on these two questions. What does inclusion mean for you? And what are the criteria that allowed us to define an inclusive education, an educational system as an inclusive one? So just reflect on these two questions along the intervention. Please raise your hand if you know how the Italian fully educational system works. Do you know? Raise your hands if you already know. Okay, we can go to the coffee break. No. Okay? It's just an example of how a nation has implemented for the last 50 years a fully inclusive educational system with all its limitations. Where we are, almost after 50 years. As you know, in Italy, in our educational system, the special classes were abolished in 1971. And since that time, a lot of steps have been crossed in the road, in the pathway toward the fully inclusive educational system. please don't imagine this fully inclusive educational system as something that is completely gained, completely reached, but it's a very pathway, it's a very road. And in this road we had very milestones steps, like the introduction of the individual education plan according to the biopsychosocial model and approach of the international classification of functioning. We had the introduction of a regulatory framework for special educational needs and for learning disorders. But probably the most important thing that you maybe already know and you need to know is that we don't have special classes. I was born in 1988 and my whole experience from kindergarten to upper secondary school is mainstream classes with students, classmates with physical, visual, hearing impairments, reduced mobility or intellectual disabilities. And this has impacted deeply on my mindset and on my perspective of what it means to have a high heterogeneous world and to live in a super diverse society and a super diverse learning environment. From kindergarten, now we should say up to university. What are the implications of having a full inclusive educational system? You know that this model of the fully inclusive educational system impacted deeply also the way the curriculum is organized. So that means that in each classroom there are students with a lot of different learning styles, with a lot of individual educational instances and different principles of differentiation, of personalization and or individualizations should be embedded in the curriculum. It should not be something that you can leave aside from the way you teach, from the way you design your teaching practices, but it's something that you need to embed and to enact in your daily practices. And it's something that impact deeply your perspectives and your assumptions as a teaching, as a head, as a director, as whatever kind of a profile or position you have as professional. A very brief overview of the actual situation, of the current situation in the Italian general schools. As I mentioned, we don't have special classes, and according to the last the most recent report, the statistical report on the situations of students with disabilities in the mainstream classes in Italy, we have 4 students with disabilities recognized, certified, every 100 students from kindergarten up to upper secondary school. And you say, okay, but concretely, what are the numbers? We are talking about 338,000 of students with disabilities in general mainstream classes from kindergarten to upper secondary schools. And with respect to this huge amount of students with disabilities, we have about 220,000 of support teachers that are hired to work as a co-teacher with the general teacher in order to support students with disabilities, students with special educational needs, and students with different kind of educational instances. And beyond, so it's a very huge, but those numbers are people. Those numbers represent the picture of the actual and current situations in our fully inclusive educational system. And beyond the students with disabilities, we have about 8 students with special educational needs every 100 students from kindergarten to, for sure, upper secondary school. This means that we have a lot of heterogeneity, different learning styles, different instances in our classes. How can we adapt to this? What kind of intervention can we take in order to respond to these challenges that are posed by this huge amount of diversity and heterogeneity represented in our classroom. And you can say what are the kind of impairments and disabilities that are included in the mainstream classes. Every kind of disabilities, every kind of impairments is included in general classes. So you have students with physical, visual, hearing impairments, intellectual disabilities, metabolic disease, or neurodevelopmental disorders, or ADHD, and so on. This is very important because this can help you understand much better what are the implications, what are the limits, what are the potentialities of a fully inclusive educational system. And you can also take some reflections with you when you will come back to your teaching practices in your school in order to understand how should we adapt our way of teaching according to this huge amount of diversity. And just to give you a very last overview of the fully inclusive educational system, becoming a support teacher is not something very easy in Italy, because in order to become a support teacher, a regular support teacher, I mean a certified, support teacher, you need to earn a 5 years degree in primary education sciences or in a disciplinary, in a subject science, and then you need to apply for a specialization post-degree course that will last for 1 year, and then you can work in 1 degree from kindergarten to upper secondary school. So it's in a huge amount of time that you need to invest in order to be prepared to work with students with disability as a co-teacher in mainstream classes. Why am I talking with you about all these regulatory and policies aspects? Because those have a deep impact in the way we consider a fully inclusive educational system and how we prepare teachers in order to be responsible and in order to be adaptable to the difference they find in their schools with their students. After offering you this general overview of a fully inclusive educational system, I want to anticipate the kind of skepticism and the kind of criticism that someone can raise regarding a fully inclusive educational system. You know that we have hundreds of thousands of literature and of scientific publications about why this model fits with the universal design for learning and fits with the idea of education for all that is promoted also in the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the People with Disability. But there are still some skepticism, especially from people that work in a differentiated or in a special education system out of Italy or out of Europe. The first skepticism, and I want to anticipate, I want to offer you a counter-narrative about this fully inclusive educational system. The first skepticism is that the presence in mainstream classroom of students with disabilities doesn't guarantee the participation, the kind of active engagement, and the kind of a sense of belonging and cultural safety that students should find in order to express their potential, in order to feel that they can belong to that nurturing learning environment. This is the commonest skepticism about mainstream classes and the fully inclusive educational system, that is not a doesn't guarantee the participation and the full engagement. There are still some kind of segregation. It might be some kind of segregation. It might be some kind of delegation of a responsibility for the students with disability to the support teachers or to someone else out of the classroom. Moreover, other very frequent or very common skepticism and criticism about a fully inclusive educational system are the fact that having in classroom students with disabilities or students with special educational needs may impede the growth and the success and the super performance of the rest of the class, or that families and parents may prefer to have a much more specialized technical support for their students, for their children, out of the classroom or with a special classroom instead of mainstream classroom, or moreover, that the fact that the students with disability and special educational needs are inserted in classroom, in a mainstream classroom, can expose them to marginalization, bullying, and any form of explicit or implicit discrimination based on their disability and their disorder. In order to deconstruct those comfort fantasy to not get out of the bubble of the special class, I just want to dismantle one by one those false myths and those skepticism and criticism about a fully inclusive educational system, starting from the scientific literature in the topic. First, there's no evidence at all that in a fully inclusive educational system, students that can be neurotypical or able are their pace is slowed down by the presence of students with disability. There's no evidence at all. And there's no evidence that the students with disability are exposed to forms of segregation or could not gain the kind of transversal skills and key competencies that will help them toward the path of an independent life project. And moreover, there's no also evidence that support teachers in a mainstream, more inclusive model are less qualified than the technical support. As I showed you, the path to become a support teacher, a certified support teacher, is quite long. We can say that they are overprepared, or they are overwhelmed, or they are overqualified, but we cannot say that they are underqualified if we just think to this example of a full inclusive educational model. Furthermore, and this is maybe the most important, there's no evidence at all that putting together, creating a cultural school environment in which students with disability and students with special educational needs stay together with the students with a neurotypical functioning, expose them to more marginalization. If we just think to the contact theory produced by Allport, we should know that the presence, the positive contact, facilitated, mediated, and also institutionalized, legitimized by the institution, can mitigate the bias and the prejudices of both students and teachers, and can also help students with difficulties, students with educational instances to grow and to express their potential in order to have access to a more justice community. And furthermore, families and parents want to be considered as a co-inquirer, co-investigators in groups, in teams of, in community of practices that share the interest to create the best conditions for students with disability and for students with educational needs to grow and to develop their talent. What we can do in practice? And I'm going to the last part of my presentation. So you can say, I just show you, the overall picture of the fully inclusive educational system, and I also offer the counter-narrative of skepticism against the fully inclusive educational system, and I dismantled one by one all the skepticism with the educational research. What we can do? First, as Professor Peckman, I really appreciate your speech, said we can start from positioning ourselves as teachers, as a head, as a director, as professor, as any kind of practitioners or professionals we have, because the curriculum is not just what we teach. We are the curriculum. The way we teach, the way we organize the materials, the way we organize the space, the way we organize the classroom, the way we organize our presence in classroom, and the way we behave with our students is the curriculum, is the informal, hidden aspect of the curriculum. So we are the first point of contact of our students. Never forget this. And we need to work on our ableist prejudices, ableist bias, the kind of bias and stereotypes that each of us has according to a kind of a supremacy that we implicitly recognize to the ability and to the construct of a performance and to the construct of being always at the top, okay? So we need to recognize how much times we consider that one student cannot be successful just because he might have some neurodiversity or he might have any kind of difficulties or learning disorders, or he may need more support. And this can be challenging for us as teachers and for us in terms of time and in terms of the kind of effort that is required to help that student. And I want to leave you with those self-reflective exercises that you can take away for the workshop in the afternoon and also for the intervention that you will have tomorrow. So just start to transform yourself, to be self-aware about how do you position yourself as a parent, as a head, as a director, as a vice director, as a governor, as a teacher, whatever. Just start with this. Just start to self-reflect on yourself and on your positioning as a person and as a professional. How many times do you neglect the capacity of your students? How many times do you, are you always aware about your feelings when you enter the classroom or when you enter this auditorium, for example? And are you aware of your internal biases? Are you aware of your internal stereotypes? And do you really want to share power with your students and authority and legitimization with your students? And where have you done any kind of a segregation or a delegation of a responsibility when you were talking about the students with learning difficulties and the students with educational instances? Just think about how many times we said, it's not my work. And we delegate the responsibility for doing anything we can do in order to support the growth of our students. Our goal, maybe of this Teachers Forum or maybe also of the next possibilities of the Teachers Forum is to become justice-oriented teachers, to become teachers capable of responding to the intersections of disability, class, gender, ethnicity, culture, diversity that our students represent in our classroom. The concept of interrelatedness that was just mentioned by Professor Connor can be applied also when we talk about the intersecting dimensions of diversity that each of us represents and that our students' identities represent in our classroom. And I also want to ask you to practice much more affirmative pedagogies. That is about motivation, that is about trust that your students can do the best they can do if they receive the adequate support material, social material, relational support that they can need. Where we are doing, where we are going, where we can go also as a European school system toward an ecosystem of a collective responsibility where we can use the metaphor of the village mindset. What we need in order to co-create an inclusive and nurturing learning environment system. We need the village mindset, the community-based mindset. It's not something that just one organizational actor can do, but we can do together in a very intertwined systems that includes our capacity of responding to students' needs, the capacity of involving families and multi-professional teams, the capacity of creating, nurturing a community where people feel that they can belong. How can we do this? We can do this just if we consider the possibility of working together as a network of schools that are interested around how to transform context, actions, practices in order to respond to the challenges of a fully inclusive educational system. That's my last slide. I just want to remind you what the United Nations Convention said about a fully inclusive educational system. In the 24th article, the United Nations Convention said that we need to do all our best in order to guarantee that students with people with disabilities, children with disabilities, children with special educational needs can have access to a full, equitable educational system. How can we do this? Together. Thank you.
Now we start the second part of this morning. We have Arabella Zaccario with us, and we are pleased to have her. Arabella is the head of the Unit of Education for Environment and Sustainable Development of Cyprus Pedagogical Institute. Welcome, Arabella. And she will talk about the all-school approach and how this all-school approach can transform school to learning communities for sustainability. A very interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this first Teachers Forum of European Schools, but especially I want to thank Roberta Fandinato for being so patient with me. I listened, I've did a lot of lectures and speeches in all over the Europe, but I think it's the first time that I had the chance to being in so enthusiastic and passionate audience. I'm not very engaged to the European schools community. I've learned about European schools a lot by my colleague Ioannis Savidis, that will chair the European schools presidency the next 2 years. And when I was invited, I was really very, very passionate to this process or to this work that you are doing to move forward with the new ecosystem, which has to do with what societies and what planet we want at the end of the day to have, and as schools and as education systems where we want to go. I will try to give not an answer, but mainly to give some speculations about the sustainability and how it's integrated in schools by highlighting and giving emphasis on whole school approach, and if whole school approach can transform schools to learning communities of sustainability. I will start by saying that the previous speakers and the people that they did the welcoming remarks, I think that they did a very good introduction to my presentation. And this has mainly to do with the fact that you talk about innovative environments, innovative schools, passionate teachers, curricula, intercultural education. So we are talking about a new school that we have to transform it based on the putting it at the center of the society and the planet. And this why, because as communities and societies, we are facing a lot of global challenges. I just identified a number of challenges which has to do with the climate crisis, migration, human rights, fundamental freedoms, health insecurity, food insecurity, water scarcity, energy, status of women, equity. All these and many others, I'm sure that you will, if I ask you, will identify me, are global challenges that cannot be seen in isolation. And they cannot be seen in a lens, under the lens of one institution or of one country. Are intersectoral, are transnational, and we have to see how each one of us individually, but also collectively, can contribute to these global processes, to this global crisis. And to be honest, I will focus on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But if you think that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is something new, no, it's not new. Has its base, its roots on the Millennium Goals that established on 2000, aiming the global to support global community to work on the basic global crisis. And these Millennium Goals, which is, if you see it, it's a first lane, were identified as 8. This finished on 2015, and finished because it was the time to reconsider what we achieved, what is remaining, and at the end of the day, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 now, what they did is that they bring all these global challenges together. And the innovative thing of these Sustainable Development Goals, it has to do with the fact that they are is the result of a global alliance and agreement between not only the countries, but between all the communities, independently, if it's an NGO, if it's an institution, if it's stakeholders from other fields. So the Sustainable Development Goals, according to the Ban Ki-moon, is that there is the only solution to confront the global crisis and global challenges. And it's the time to take it seriously, because the impacts and the consequences of this planetary crisis are in our lives and are closely connected with our survival. So the importance of SDGs, these Sustainable Development Goals, which are horizontal and cannot be seen again in isolation. I was explaining before that we cannot talk about climate crisis and not connect climate crisis with the migration. We cannot leave behind the issue of food insecurity with the poverty. I mean, all these issues which are social, are not ecological, are social, political, economical, and environmental, of course, ecological, are working together as a system. That's why this moment and the last, especially 5 years, the whole discussion behind Sustainable Development Goals has to do with the, is a flagship, is a hot spot, because if we don't have a planet, that we cannot have lives. This is so simple. And I'm going to give you an example about something that has to do with the no hunger, the Sustainable Development Goal 2. No hunger. I'm using no hunger because the whole base of no hunger is on agriculture and farming. And now we're confronting very critical issues which has to do with the food insecurity. Food insecurity is something that is in the discussion every day. But how I can see, for example, no hunger with no poverty? If I don't have enough food, I cannot feed the people, so I cannot give them the basics rights for having food. Or we're connecting SDG 2 with quality education, but quality education is this that is giving the skills and the competences, not to all of us, but to the new generation especially, to develop, new jobs which has to do with all these green innovations. We are talking about SDG and water, but if I don't have water, how can have agriculture? We are talking about consumption and production. How I will consume if I don't have enough resources? Everything is connected, so simple. And I'm going now, I realized, Roberta, yesterday night that I did a presentation for 2 hours. and I tried to reduce it. That's why I resent. But I think time is not enough, so I will speed up. Anyway, what I want to say is that in this process for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which are related with our survival, we have to invest in education. But when we are saying to invest in education, we are talking to invest on quality education. And quality education is closely related with the education for sustainable development. And what do we mean by quality education and effective education? We are talking to consider students' background, the school environment, the curriculum, the teaching methods, the techniques, the learning outcomes. To have schools, institutions, universities as open community of learnings. To think globally, to act locally, and then think and act globally. Everything starts from where we are. To promote intergovernmental communication, linking formal with non-formal education, promote experiential and experimental learning, to promote community action, to promote synergies and joint actions between all the interested parties. We have to see education as a whole and not in a fragmented way. Why to use a curricula when everything or the rest things in school are not the example of having curricula oriented to sustainability? I mean that we have to see all these issues in education in a systemic and in a holistic way. Professional development, the key role, and we don't have to ignore it, the power is to teachers. Those, they are the leaders, though we are inspiring, we are the leaders, we are those that we can do changes. And of course, a revision of the contents and promote and use more interactive educational tools. Project-based approach, competences, to develop the long-term plans, monitoring and evaluation. It's time to see the evaluation very seriously, but not just to count the performance of students, but to see the improvement of the system in the school, to empower youth and have a value-driven organization. We have to move to value education, value-based education. We have to reconsider our ethical codes, comparing to us, to the others, and to the environment. And all this can be achieved only through whole school approach. What we mean by whole school approach? All the school not be confronted as an organization, as a place where we are going and educate students. In Greek, we have a word which means pedia. Pedia is, if I go back to the Latin roots, and because you are Italian, we have to do with the colere. I mean, developing, creating, framing the spirit, the mind, the anima. Pedia is not education. Education is the way to pedia, means to be holistic personalities and have our, actions emerge through our value ethical code. So the whole school approach has to do not just with the curricula, but how a school, an institution, is operating as a community of learning. And this has to do with the vision, the mission, the ethos of the school, has to do with what professional development we are providing to the teachers, to the pedagogical approaches, and of course, to the interconnections of school and community. We have to go outside of school. School cannot be outside of what is happening outside from the community, from the society. This is very funny to having text, books, and saying going to page 35 when things are happening outside of school. So, whole school approach is the answer and is the only, and is not a new term, it's not a new concept, has been officially launched in 2008 but now has been came up very, very intensively because this term seems, this approach seems to be very, captures things more holistically and long term. I'm going to give you some examples about the international and regional policies, I mean in European Union, where whole school approach is integrated. I'm using, I don't know if you're familiar with the United Economic Commission for Europe, UNEC, which is the biggest committee for education for sustainable development about in Europe, and I'm saying you are listening United Nations, but all the European countries are part of the UNEC. Very recently has done a very big evaluation on how whole school approach is integrated in various countries. So 34 countries evaluated, amongst them many Europeans. So whole school approach on ESD is integrated in many ways in various countries. And it differs from different educational levels. In kindergarten, we have seen you can apply whole school approach through ESD school plans, international programs in post-secondary education with certification schemes, funding schemes, partnerships, in master in universities with performance agreement and so on. But also, to do the whole school approach, you have to give incentives. So, in many European countries, different incentives are given, like resources, training materials, mentoring, awards, networking opportunities. And the main findings of this big report is that to implement education for sustainable development through whole school approach needs to be longitudinal in order to be systemically applied. Also cannot be a recipe. The implementation of whole school approach varies from country to country. We need organizational structures that will support this. And of course, we need a system that will facilitate and accommodate countries and institutions to apply it. If we go now to see how important is the whole school approach to sustainability and green transition, this is an example of the European policies that recently revised and included whole school approach at the core of education systems. If we go to the environmental policy recommendations for learning for environmental sustainability, transforming education, the implementation framework of UNEC on 2021 to 2030, the GENE, the global citizenship and DSD, the UNESCO human rights, fundamental freedoms and sustainable development, a new European Bauhaus. These policies are only some of the policies that now make this reconsideration and give emphasis to education, to sustainability and whole school approach. In the framework of the UNEC, very briefly I will pass this, in the framework of the UNEC ESD framework, which is the new strategy policy for ESD till 2030, some critical questions are raised. How can institutions be supported to integrate whole school approach? If and how a specific universal framework of indicators can support countries to apply whole institution approach, what policies and tools we have to take into consideration, what system of indicators we need, how can the systemic and long-term implementation of whole school approach can support and beyond school, and in which ways schools can be facilitated, infrastructure, tools, curriculum, funds. Regarding these policies of the UNEC in the UNEC context, now is prepared the whole institutional framework for all the countries. And we hope that these will support countries to integrate whole school approach more effectively. Also, in the UNESCO framework, through the ESD 2030 roadmap, the learning environments, the whole school approach is considered as one of the main pillars to this process. And of course, we have the EU policy recommendations on learning for environmental sustainability, where whole school approach brings environmental sustainability at the heart of the school. And of course, it includes 5 main dimensions. Then governance, which has to do with the mission, the statement, the ethos of the school, the guiding frameworks, the teaching and the learning frameworks, how it will be taught, campus and facilities management. It's not enough, the curriculum. We need infrastructures. So how we can reconstruct or making better the school environment, the school infrastructures in the framework of sustainability. And of course, collaboration with the broader community. As I already mentioned to you, it's not a new idea, the whole school approach. It's a model, it's an approach that began to be discussed in early 2000, or in the early of 2000. And these are some of the models that already developed. Is the UNESCO model for whole school approach, is the sustainable school is the German model for whole school approach. I'm passing them because I will make a synthesis. Is the USA model, the 4C models for whole school approach. And very recently is the Flower model, which is the Dutch Netherlands model, which is considered as the most concrete and comprehensive one, and is used by many countries, especially, the Scandinavian countries. What is interesting in these just indicative examples of models that I present you is that they are giving emphasis on the vision, on the ethos, on campus, on the culture, on the curriculum, on the community. For models that developed in different timelines, but the essence of the whole school approach is the same. And I'm going now just to give you an example from the Cyprus context, and I'm finishing with this. I'm finishing, are some slides. I will not finish so easily. It's my honor to be here, and it's a privilege for me. And I use the Cyprus example because Cyprus is considered as a championship country in the field of education for sustainable development. It's the first country that introduced officially a curriculum on ESD. It's a country that aligned all its educational policies in the framework of sustainability. So, in 2009, Cyprus introduced the ESD curricula. But this ESD curricula is not just a curricula. It's the tool, it's a means to integrate each school its sustainable environmental education policy. We are not teaching the curricula. We don't have the subjects and you are going and you are learning about climate change or about, loss of biodiversity or about sustainable tourism. No. All these thematic units are used as a tool to implement each school its sustainable environmental education policy. And this is the official policy in Cyprus. Each school, especially in pre-primary and primary education, to develop its sustainable development agenda. And this sustainable development agenda has specific steps to make the initial investigation to identify the issues, to select the issue and justify why you select it, to formulate this plan, which has to do with the determination of the changes that you want to do in the school, in the community, what thematic units of the curriculum you will use, and planning each class based on the general sustainable agenda of the school is developing its class program. And what we want to ensure with that all the school community is working for achieving the same tasks. And when we're saying achieving, to act and intervene to make at least a small change based on the issue that they investigated. And of course, something that is very important is that We have the self-reporting. The self-reporting monitoring of school, which has not to do with the ranking of the schools, has to do with the self-improvement of the schools. And this self-reporting is based on qualitative and quantitative indicators. I know it's very Greek to you, but it's just to have an idea how is the self-reporting. Okay, we have 56 indicators on social, organizational, technical, and pedagogical level. And you see, this is how it's explained to the teachers, to the school community, to do their self-reporting. And of course, the whole idea behind this whole school approach is based on guiding the teachers. So if you see the green one, it's the guide for teachers in the school community how to implement their sustainable environmental education agenda, and of course how to work together. And the other two small guiding books has to do with the ideas to develop their agenda, and the second one has to do with what actions I can take in various issues. I'm passing this. This guide is supported by 12 small books, which has to do with the thematic units of the curricula. This is about poverty. I will make a translation. Poverty, biodiversity, tourism, culture and environment. You see, those are and you see each book develop the learning outcomes. What students should learn from grade A to B, from 0, which is the pre-primary, A to B, which is the first grade, C to D, which is the second, and 5th to 6th, which is the 3. And the learning outcomes are interrelated together. I'm finishing by saying that whole school approach in Cyprus is not just to do with the school, has to do with the whole spirit and idea on how we want to work about sustainability in Cyprus. And this is the example on how we use the whole institution approach in the revised strategic framework for ESD in 2030. We revised the National Strategy on Education for Sustainable Development, which is the most official document in Cyprus, and includes all the main actions and reforms that we promote for sustainability holistically and in a systemic way. If you see formal with non-formal education are together, and if you see informal education, we are promoting specific things which has to do with the systemic character. I'm concluding because I saw that time is passing. One of the new reforms that we are now doing in Cyprus is that we are trying to revise the systemic framework for whole school approach. This flower is not developed by Cyprus. It's a collective work of 12 countries. 12 countries for 3 years, we try to develop this systemic work, this flower, for whole school approach based on the idea of Netherlands. This systemic approach, which has to do with the social, pedagogical, organizational, and has to do with the 5R, to be responsive, to be reflective, is a systemic framework that we will use it. We hope that we will manage to use it and in the rest of the countries. This will be applied in Cyprus from the next September. But what is very important is that we introduced the accreditation scheme of sustainable schools with qualitative and quantitative indicators. And this will be every 4 years by external evaluators, and of course will not be a tool of putting schools in rankings, but to give them opportunity to become better with themselves, their school community. And finally, the ESD curricula, which will be transformed now, Those are the main. We are working now, and something a very, very brave decision that the government received is that from September 2024 will be introduced officially in secondary education. So we are doing a big transformations which has to do with implementation of whole school approach, integrate green innovation, entrepreneurship, be competence-based, project-based, green skills, and digital education. We are 4 pedagogical units, teams in Cyprus now, and we're working to revise the curricula according to these new dimensions. So, I'm going back to my question. Can whole school approach transform schools to sustainability? If we do structural transformations, and if we consider internal factors, and if we bring together external factors, and focus on organizational learning and decision and applied decision and decision-make process. And finally, these are some words, but are very important words, because if we want to apply a whole school approach and sustainability in schools or in every institution, first of all, we have to have the willingness to change, to be committed, to be open-minded, to have the spirit of collaboration, sense of ownership, sense of belonging, intervention to intervene and act. We have to have in mind that small changes leads to big changes. And I put at the end, etc., because I'm sure that you will complete on this big, list. And this is the final slide. These are my final thoughts, my personal thoughts. I'm working in the field of sustainability 25 years. I'm working with the whole school approach the last 15 years. I think that whole school approach and sustainability, it's not a utopia. Can be very concrete and be very physical and can be a reality. Just to have in mind that it's not a recipe and it's not applied by guidelines. It's like a DNA. It's unique for each institution that is applied. It tackles to change, and we have to invest on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the last keynote speech. We give the floor to Mattia Baiutti. Mattia is an European PhD in education, and he works as key researcher and training facilitator for teacher and principal at Fondazione Intercultura in Milan. And Mattia is going to talk about a very interesting topic. At the end, Professor Melloni will give us the closing remarks. Welcome, Mattia.
Thank you indeed. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Director Fantinato, and also thank you, Professor Saccardo, for inviting me to this wonderful teacher forum. I work in Fondazione Intercultura in Colle di Valdelsa, so in Tuscany, not in Milan, okay. And I am a researcher and also a teacher training, so this is my expertise. But today I'm being asked to talk about European and democratic values in the context of internationalization of school education. And first of all, I would like to say that when we speak about values, it's sometimes uncomfortable. It's complex, it's challenging, but sometimes it's uncomfortable. But at the same time, as an educators, we know that every single educational action has an intrinsic values. One reason why it's difficult to speak about value is because it can be a subject of a lot of different disciplines, and they might be understood in a very different way. So I would like to underline from the very beginning that my talk took the perspective of educational perspective with some points from psychology. And so my plan for today, which is going to be quite fast, is going to be to have a look just to some European educational policies regarding values, and then we will focus on the role of values within intercultural and democratic competence, and we will see the mix of all this with the idea of the internationalization of school education, and then we will try to touch a very sensitive topic, which is how to assess this at school. But before that, I would like also to mention why are values important. Basically, according to the psychological research, values are closely linked to goals, attitude, and behavior. And this means that they are significantly have an impact on important outcomes. And there is also a recent research that showed that people who consider center values very important are likely to act in line with those values often. So this is the reason why in school we should create an environment of values. But the point is, what are the intended values that we should encourage? I'm sure that all of us who are here present, we know that the European Union is founded on following values, which are human dignity, freedom, democracy, and also equality, rule of law, and human rights. And also, we all knew that there is now this huge and very important project, which is the European Educational Area, where the European Commission has taken several steps, including to publish this recommendation specifically on common values, inclusive education, and the European dimension of teaching. And we know that in this recommendation, there is also the attempt to try to combat xenophobia, prevent radicalization, try to go against nationalism and stop the spread of fake news. So this is the main, I would say, documents on values from the European Union. But if we look to another organization that was already mentioned several times today, the Council of Europe, we know that the Council of Europe has extensively worked on values, and they connect these values to the school in particular. And so they publish this reference framework of competence for democratic culture. This is the volumes. There are 3 volumes, but as well you can download for free all and in different languages. So it's possible to have all these tools with you. And this framework is a comprehensive, coherent, competence-based approach to citizenship education, to human rights education, and intercultural education. So they are really important in order to equip young people with competence that they need to participate actively in the democratic culture, but at the same time are important for developing respect and to defend the human rights, and also for engaging in respectful and effectively intercultural dialogue. So indeed, this framework is based on 2 assumptions. The first assumption is already present in the title of the framework, which is the democratic culture. It's not only democracy, but the democratic culture. Because the assumption is that while democracy can exist while democracy cannot exist without democratic institutions, the law, the parliament, and so on and so forth, these institutions themselves cannot work in practice unless citizens hold democratic values and attitude. So this is the reason why democratic culture is fundamental. In particular, it's important to develop at school level. The second point is linking to intercultural dialogue, because in the participation, every people need to explain what they mean, what they want to achieve, and they have to understand the political perspective. So the intercultural dialogue, it's a way which citizens can communicate their view, their needs, concern, and so on and so forth. And this is the reason why the intercultural dialogue is completely linking to the democratic culture. So all these have this graphical representation, is the butterfly model, as we know, where you can find 20 competencies, but the important part is that in this framework, which are listed the competence that the people required to participate effectively in democratic culture and intercultural dialogue, are the classical element of the competence, who are the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude. But what is innovative in this butterfly model is the part of the values. So now we will focus a little bit on this. So what are the values according to this framework? Basically, they are general belief that individuals hold about goals that should be striven for in life. And they are motivation, they motivate action, and they also guide decisions on how to act. They also transcend specific action, so they are more cross situation and context. And they have a normative prescriptive quality. So values offer a kind of standard or a kind of criteria, we can say, to evaluate action, to justify opinion, attitude, behaviors, decide between possibilities, planning behavior, and attempting and influence others. So some of you might be, who are familiar, I'm sure you are familiar with competence models, that there is the presence of these values. Basically, usually, values are incorporated into the attitudes. But in this case, because this competence model is based on a very psychological perspective, which is the model of Schwartz, on values, actually. So he created a distinction between attitude and values, and this is the reason why we have this distinction into this framework. But at the same time, this model of Schwartz influence the values that are listed into the framework model. And in particular, the one that are linked to universalism. Universalist concern that include human dignity, human rights, democracy, justice, equality, a role of law, and also universalist tolerance, which are in particular the value of cultural diversity. So, but why the Council of Europe, in particular Martin Barrett, but also Mike Byram that was mentioned before, and the group of experts decide to put this into this model? Basically, the assumption is that without an explicit point of these values, the other part of the butterfly may be just an example of political competencies. But political competence might be also for dictatorship. So it's very important to clarify the values in where your horizon, basically, so your aim. And so this is the reason why you can find the values in this framework. Framework that is also present in the guideline for the development of internationalization process for technical and vocational education sector that was just published recently by the Italian Ministry of Education. So this helps us to understand immediately that there is a connection between this kind of competencies and the internationalization of schools education. I know that the majority of you are from European schools, so you are in your DNA, there is the internationalization, but if we look to all schools in the system, the number of the schools that are working on internationalization is just a few, even if the European Commission helps a lot in this regard, because sometimes national school became nationalistic, and this is something that they have to avoid, and these guidelines might help somehow. So what we understand as internationalization of school education. So this is the definition that come out from a research that we have done in Fondazione Intercultura and also as being adopted by the guidelines. So we mean a process, an intentional process, and also is a transformative process to incorporate international, intercultural, and global dimension in all aspects of the school life. And in order to do this, we propose the whole school approach that was extensively presented in the previous presentation. The aim is twofold. There is an internal outcome, which is to enhance the quality of education, not only for the pupil. We are in a community there. So for all the people who are at school, teachers, staff, families, and the other part of the community. And then there is an external one. So to make a mindful this contribution to the society. So this dual focus ensure that the benefit of internationalization extend beyond the school boundaries and foster a positive impact on the wider community and also contribute for a global understanding. And if we look this from, let's say, a practical perspective, we can see that we have internationalization at home, what the majority of you European school do. Basically, it's to promote an international dimension into the local school environment, internationalization of curriculum, CLIL, all the part of the languages, of course, but also workshop of international and intercultural education, global citizenship education, peace education. But traditionally, the majority of the internationalization was linked to mobility. So something that implies a mobility of the teacher, mobility of the directors, mobility of the student, of course. And one of the key intended competence of attending from this internationalization of school is the intercultural competence that, according to the framework, it's a part of the democratic competence. And so we can say that some of the value listed into the framework are developed mainly with the internationalization of school education. So I ran quite a lot to arrive to this point, which is quite the usually when I go to I enter to the school for teacher training, they told me, oh, this is fantastic what you are saying, this framework is very useful, but then how can we implement it? how can we assess these values? So, I have not a complete answer, just some tips that might be useful for your daily practice. So, when we speak about assessment, first of all, we need to understand that it's important to adopt a multi-method approach, which means that we should use different tools to collect data in order to assess. We have portfolios, we have logbooks, we have a reality test, we have presentations, and so forth. And all these help us to have a multi-perspective. So to have different perspective in order to assess not only my perspective as a teacher, but also what the pupil think about his or her learning journey. What is the meaning that he give or she give to this? And also the peer assessment, which is an important part of the assessment that we usually miss. And then we should do this in different moments. So it's an ongoing collecting of data. And indeed, we should have two types of assessment. This is the formative assessment, when we provide mainly feedbacks to the student to improve their learning, but at the same time, there is the summative assessment, which is at the end of the journey. But be very careful that the assessment is not something after a project. It's internal to educational part of the project, of the learning. Through assessment, students can learn. Indeed, we should speak about educative assessment. And usually we try to do this with some rubrics. The point is, how can we have rubrics on values? So, we don't have a rubric, but we have descriptors. So the entire secondary volume of the framework of democratic culture decide to have these descriptors, and the descriptors are basically a statement or a description of what a student should be able to do if he or her she have mastered a particular competence to a particular level. And each descriptor contains an active verb who describe mainly a behavior that can be observed. And at the same time, because the language that is used to create this descriptor follow the learning outcomes languages, they might be useful in order to develop curriculum, for instance. And this is an important part, at least for researchers. These descriptors have been validated and scaled. So we have these three levels of proficiency: basic level, intermediate level, and advanced level. But it's not just a couple of experts that they found themselves in an office to decide. There were more than 2,000 teachers involved that use this descriptor to understand how everything is working with this. And this is only one example specifically on valuing human dignity and human rights. So there are some possibilities that you might adopt it in order to assess the values. So I will conclude with three self-reflection questions. I saw that also my colleague before me give you some reflection, so a lot of reflection, but we are here for reflecting, I guess. So first of all, which value do I wish to promote through my educational action? And I will call this like a teleological question. And then, what values am I currently promoting with my educational action? So the understanding question. And then, if there is a misalignment between the values and action, what step can I take as an educator to align my educational action with the values I am to promote. So, and I will call this the change maker question. So just think about these kind of things, because our action are an intrinsic value, as I mentioned at the very beginning. And I will conclude with this sentence. Last week, our Fondazione Intercultura has this huge international conference. We were in Palazzo Vecchio at Florence, and on Tuesday we have this Lectio Magistralis delivered by Mauro Cerutti, who presented his theory of complexity that is based also on Edgar Morin. At the center point, he cites Ernesto Balducci, who says, l'uomo del futuro o sarà un uomo di pace o non sarà, which somehow I try to translate that the human being of the future will either be a human being of peace or they will not exist. I guess that Balducci's words underscore our crucial responsibility as educators. We are tasked with fostering the values of interculturality and democracy to both ourselves, and I would like to underline ourselves, and the younger generation. And these values, embodying peace at their core, are vital for our future. Grazie mille.
Thank you to Mattia Baiutti. Very interesting speech and very actual indeed. Now we are definitely privileged to have Professor Alberto Melloni to deliver the closing remarks. He will help us to reflect on the essence of this morning dialogues and speech. Thank you, Professor Melloni.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you to all of you. Roberta told me that there are two languages for the conference today, English and Bad English. I will use the second one. And another first remark, Roberta presented me as the Chief Scientific Advisor of the Commission, actually one of the 7 Chief Scientific Advisors of the Commission. We are like the 7 dwarfs. I take the position of Grumpy, Brontolo, and the Commission is our Snow White in what we are trying to do. So first point I'd like to underline is that I have the feeling that this forum is very important because there is something that in my view is weakening EU citizenship. It is the fact that we work and we speak in an area of conceptual fragility. We always use a certain number of words as Shalagabula, Megicabula, and we suppose that everybody knows what Shalagabula, Megicabula means, but actually you put in Shalagabula, Megicabula very different contents. So we speak about sustainability, ecosystem, superdiversity, inclusivity. Holistic is one of the last word that is very à la page. We speak about values, and we all know that we have listened. It's very different if you say values are principles, or if you say values are beliefs. And this made me think of a sentence of one of the most important Italian philosophers, Antonio De Curtis, in Arte Totò, that in 1941 in San Giovanni Decollato made a wonderful sentence in macaronic Latin, verba generalia non sunt appiccicatoria. Generic words are not so sticky as you may think. So when we speak about teachers, teaching, students, all the things that we have mentioned today, sustainable goals, inclusivity, values, and so on, we have to be very sure that we are speaking about the same things. Because if not, we can have the false idea that we all agree on everything, but actually there is a reality check out there that says to us that we are not so competent and so capable to understand what is out there with the due capacity. One of the most hidden figure of the European statistics system is the number of kids that suffer of sexual assault during their early life from 0 to 18 years old. Guess a number in your mind. Done? The number is 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5. This is the European educational system. It is the landscape in which violence is much more widespread than any of us can imagine, where there is a pressure of hate, disrespect, violence, abuse, and so on, that we cannot imagine. And the educational world, the system of school, is a system in which there is, in theory, the possibility of recovering this type of violence, of treating this type of violence in those who are suffering of it, and those who are offering it to the other ones. But for doing this, we have to be very clear about what we are talking of. So let me come back a bit to Latin to make some distinction about what the teacher is supposed to do. As you all know, in Latin there are at least 3 words for speaking about education. One is the word at the origin of instruction. The other is at the origin of education. The other is at the origin of what in English is said teaching, that in Italian we would call the insegnare, l'enseignement. And they have very different meanings. Instruere is to provide weapons or tool to defend yourself, to affirm yourself. Education is educere, to take out somebody out of what is supposed to be or to become. And l'enseignement is to impress a sign in the mind of the people that is listening to you. So the English word teach is very simple, and it has a different origin, is to point out. It's a Germanic word, dengu, but it's different, and in my view is less important than the 3 other ones that are the role that the teachers are called to practice in a very complex situation and society. Very complex on a societal point of view. The change of the landscape is changing every type of perspective. A few moments ago, Professor Romano spoke to us about inclusive school, and it is perfectly true that the Italian system is a very inclusive system, very inclusive schools, but it is very different if you belong to a family that is wealthy, affluent, cultivated. And so if you have to get a diagnosis of autism, this is not scaring you, and you can use this as a tool for improving the possibilities and the capacity of your sons and daughters. But if you are from a poor migrant family, the word autism is a ghost, and you don't want ghosts inside your house. And you prefer to drop the boys or the girls outside the educational system instead of having the ghost in your house. And so in this situation, what is asked to the educational system is to have a sort of omniscience, taking care of everything and every side of human life, and offering always the proper results and the proper contributions. Of course, this will not happen. To do everything, everywhere, for everybody, every time, it is unrealistic. And so what we have to adopt in the teacher forum, in my view, is a more realistic idea that is taking into account on one side the heroism of the teaching classes, and on the other side the limit of the teaching class. We cannot ask the teachers to be everything, everywhere, for everybody. And so this is not a problem to making priorities, but it's a problem to have a vision. The second aspect that is threatening, into my view, the discourse is not only the conceptual fragility of the categories that we use, but also the fact that the educational system has a very specific characteristic. there is no other domain of science or society, football included, in which you will find the idea that everybody can have a strong opinion on that. So there is no matter of competences. Nobody will speak about how to apply a bypass to a patient with the same type of self-assurance that I'm expressing the most important thing. There is a refrain that is very interesting. I tried to make a catalog, but I've stopped before Carità di Patria. To catalog all the ministers or presidents of the Council of Ministers or statesmen in Italy that started the school saying, "My wife is a teacher." My wife is the teacher, so I know everything about school, of course. Less about my wife, probably, but everything about school. Let me add that my wife is a teacher. And so the field in which teachers are asked to play is a very wet field. It's very complicated to play a normal game because everybody is entering, and you are playing to basket and they are playing to rugby. And so the game is very complicated so some less negative considerations. One of the changes that is affecting the European society is the fact that the population is changing and the culture are changing. This is the most European thing that may happen. Normans in Sicily or Hungarian in Hungary are part of our history, and if there is something that is truly European, it's the fact that we don't have a culture, but we have many cultures mixed, revolving, changing, conflicting, finding different balances, and after a while thinking that they are the only one that existed since a long while. But the difficulty that we have in this changing society is that thousands of clients of the educational system are asking not to be treated as clients, but to be treated as actors and active actors of their own future. And in this, the issue of linguistic pluralism that was mentioned as a very complicated issue. A few weeks ago, Professor Prodi came back from a visit to Shanghai. And as it is usual, Professor Prodi goes to Shanghai, that happens very often. They always take him to a nice school to show him the progress of the Chinese education. So since 1975, I think, it's very complicated to impress Professor Prodi with a new school in China. But the last time that made a great result, because they showed to him a school in which kids are learning Chinese and Hausa, the main language of Nigeria. 1 out of 4 African boys and girls in the next 20 years will speak Hausa. And so plurilingualism means that the difference between China and Europe is that we have native Hausa-speaking boys and girls in our system. The problem is that we have no way to take this as a value, and we take this mostly as a problem, as a barrier to receive a proper linguistic education. That is an essential one, because if I am black and I speak in a proper Italian, I'm a colored person. If I am black and I speak in infinitive, I'm negro. And this is a difference that must be taken into consideration, but without forgetting that if we don't are European, if we don't make of differences a value, this will not work. Big little parenthesis, and one of those who think that values is a very dangerous thing if you're not a very strong Kantian, because values is something that has the value that you give to the value itself. And in one of the wording of the Commission, we always say values and principles to make clear that it's not the same type of idea. So second aspect is this one, the idea of using differences as richness for our educational system, and to use languages as an instrument of creating equality and not simply creating barriers for the people. In 2050, the most common language of the native European will be Arabic, not English. And this is something that you must take into consideration. Third point, truce is over. The educational system has populated the European dreams and the European policies, and the European education area is one of these dreams, with the idea that we had in our past the famous and glorious 70 years of peace. We are not like Lieutenant Dan of Forrest Gump. Instead of having our father and grandfather and grandfather and grandfather dying on a battlefield, we are the first one that are not dying in a battlefield. I'm the first one that in my family that is not dying in a battlefield. My father was in a battlefield, but in a concentration line, but he's not much better than me. The problem is that we were wrong. What we lived through was not peace, was a truce. Was simply a truce, a very long truce. And during that truce, we had to adopt a different set of mind, and instead of thinking that everything was at our disposal, time was at our disposal, we have to think that we have not so much time to do what we want to do. And now that the truce is over, that war came again after the Balkans at the eastern borders of the Union, that anti-Semitism had been ignited by a pogrom like the one that Hamas perpetrated on October the 7th in the desert of the Negev, the border of the Gaza Strip. In this context, our task is much more complicated. For the first time in the truce, we have young generation and young electors that think that to be neo-Nazi or neo-fascism is indeed an opinion. And we have to say very clearly, this is one of the favorite sentences of David Sassoli, that fascism is not an opinion, it's a crime. Nazism is not an opinion, it's a crime. And so to resist to this, and to offer critical instrument, mostly to the guys most exposed to this, is very complicated. Islamic fundamentalism is not an opinion, nor a religion, it's a crime. And to deal with this is very complicated. And so what we have to be sure of, that there is no easy solution for big problems. One of the things that comes when we speak about school very often is the idea that school is the proper vaccine against hate, against violence, against all these type of things. And sometimes this is true. But what the history of the European area taught to us in the 20th century is that you may have very complex and sophisticated culture that was unable to vaccinate countries and people from the most horrible things. The Germany of the best composers and philosophers, mathematicians and physics was unable to contain Nazism in the 20s and in the 30s. And so also for us, we must not have illusion that it is easy just to put much more Berliner Philharmonie in our culture and everything will go in the proper direction. The problem is to offer a culture that raises a sense of responsibility. So in order to avoid the sentence of Dr. Verba Generalia, Consulta Appiccicatoria, I will close this remark with a wonderful Talmudic interpretation of the second verse of the book of the Genesis. You're all familiar with the Bible and you know the Bible by heart, and so I can avoid any quotation. The second verse waters explains how the Almighty divided the water above from the water under the sky. And there is plenty of Talmudic consideration of what is making this division. Why the waters above does not come down? Why they stay where they have been set? And why the Almighty divided the waters above from the water under the sky? And so there is plenty of nice interpretation, very moralistic. The waters are very obedient to the Almighty. And so when you say, you will stay above, they will stay above. This is endorsing a paternalistic view of waters, and also probably not only waters. There is mystic interpretation. There were two types of waters. They look to be very similar, but only the Almighty knew the waters that are decided to be above and the other waters. And so the waters above have been fulfilled in their expectations and in their will. But there is another interpretation that has to do with the type of ceremony that is celebrated at the end of Shabbat, that is the Havdalah. Havdalah means separation. It is the word that in Genesis is used to indicate the separation between the two types of waters. At the end of the Shabbat, there is a separation, not between waters, but between time. The sacred time of the Shabbat, the time in which men and women can become what they are to do without work, without any active role, and the time of profanity in which work and earning your bread is your duty. And so what the Havdalah does is to mark a responsibility. The waters stay above because they feel the responsibility to stay where they are. The other waters have the responsibility to stay where they are. And so what I think is that one of the problem of the teacher, but one also of the magic of the teacher is this one, namely to teach responsibility, to teach the fact that each of us is responsible for all, and each of us is responsible for the destiny of the other human beings around him or her. And so the sense of responsibility is probably something that will be in the future one of the secret and most powerful weapons that we have at our disposal to make a peaceful explosion of responsibility around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Melloni. Very, very nice. I will send it to you. And